So this is another open CV review. So I'm a little bit surprised that it's written in English, but that just means, or that just implies that this person is applying for some international position. And I've already marked it up, so I've already read it, I've already marked it up, so I'm just going to give my supplementary verbal comments after I've marked it up to clarify what I've written. So I like the template in some way. So it looks like the person has written a template or used a template. I like the photo. The photo looks professional and I think it helps a lot. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the template on page 2, because I think the template looks really good on page 1, but I don't think the template looks good on page 2. So looking at the column on the left, I'm going to start with that, right? And then I'll go through the rest of the professional experience. So starting with the top left, female, I would just remove that. I don't think it's necessary to add that. I would also remove the birth date, because when you apply for a job, you'll always be filling out some form, and the form will ask you to fill out a gender, and it will ask you to put your birth date, so you don't need to actually supply any of those things on your CV. Phone number is fine. I would add the country code, maybe, to the phone number. Email is fine. Relationship status I would not put on there. It's just unnecessary, right? It's not a necessary thing to add. Okay, and then address is fine. Education and qualifications. Okay, so this one has the order of the order kind of, I would change the order. Let's just say I would start with the most recent qualification or certificate, put that at the top, and put them in reverse chronological order. Maybe. Well, I guess it's not. It could go either way, but I would definitely have the degree qualification first and then the year second, like over to the right, so to speak. So Bachelor of Mathematics with the university. You might want to mention your degree classification or how well you did, right? If you had a really good GPA, or if you got a really good score at the end. If in the UK it might be called a distinction. If you got a distinction, you would want to mention that. If you had a good GPA, you would mention that. Foreign Trade Department Economic University, HCMC. Okay, I'm looking at that and I don't know what that is. So I don't know what qualification that is. Is that a certificate? Is that a degree? Like I'm looking at that and I just don't know what it is. So it needs to be clarified, like what that is actually. A Certificate of Information Technology. That one needs to be clarified a little bit more. Who is the awarding body? Who gave you that certificate? That needs to be clarified. And yeah, I think that's very mysterious. So I would hope that whatever you did there in the Certificate of Information Technology, whatever you did there would end up in the technical skills, like that you have a computer skills. So whatever you did in that course on information technology, I hope that it ends up in the underneath the computer skills, right? And then first line leadership, again, I don't know what that is. Is that a training course? Is that a certificate? who is the awarding body, right? And is there like for these qualifications, there's also a question of how well did you do? Did you finish with good scores or bad scores? If you finish with like a good classification, you mention that. If you didn't finish with a good classification, then you just leave it out, right? Skills and competencies. So teamwork. You'll notice, by the way, if you look really carefully, I have marked things up in that left column, but you can't see it because the background is so dark. But I've highlighted some things that are also not so easy to see. But if you look carefully, I've highlighted some things. So teamwork, well organized. I would remove that, right? I think teamwork is fine, but well organized, I would just remove. It's too generic. Like anybody can put that down, right? Oral communication skills, you can put that down, but it is also, again, very, very generic. Time management, I would remove that. It's just too generic. Self-motivation, I would remove that too. It's too generic. Leadership, okay, that could be maybe a little bit more specific, like team leadership. Building strong relationships, I would remove that. Just remove it. It's too generic. For presentation, that's very unusual to have something called presentation under skills and competencies. I would consider, if the person I was reviewing this CV for was here, I would ask them, like, what do you mean by this? What are you trying to say here? Like, why do you have this here? And I would offer some suggestions about alternatives or maybe better things that are possible there. Critical thinking, okay, but very generic. Again, I probably wouldn't put it there, actually. Working under pressure, okay, it's again, I think it's okay, but it's not absolutely necessary. It's very generic again. Public speaking, I wouldn't put public speaking here at all unless you have evidence to back it up. So evidence for public speaking includes like the title of the talk that you gave, where you gave the talk, the date of the talk that you gave, the audience, like who invited you, maybe a link to a YouTube video, for example. But I wouldn't just splash public speaking on there unless you have evidence, right? I've seen that before, and I've seen people do that, and they don't provide evidence, and it looks really suspicious. Problem solving, again, I would remove because it's too generic. You could keep those things if you can make them more specific, like specific problems that you know how to solve. Self-confident and patient, I would remove that too. It's too generic. MC skill, I would remove that because I'm not even sure what it means. Master of ceremony skills, I wouldn't put that down either. What I could imagine, if you want to say that you have masters of ceremony skills or leadership skills or public speaking skills, again, you would provide the evidence, like what events did you actually serve as an MC for, and you'd have like a list of events or a list of talks, right, with the locations, the dates, what was the occasion, like you'd be more specific, right? Organized events, again, that's too generic. You just remove that, or you have a list of events that you actually organized. somewhere in your CV, then that would be really good, actually. That would be really good. But you'd have to be specific with the events. Like, what was the event? Did it have a title? Who were you organizing it for? What were the dates of the events? Where did they take place? Do they have a web page? And so on. So you provide all the details. Computer skills is good. But again, I would hope that you'd be able to put something else there if you did a certificate B of information technology. Was that really just using Office, or was there a little bit extra? That would be, anything you can put there is really good. Okay, so the objective, I think it's good that you have an objective there. Like, a lot of people don't have that. I can see from this CV, by the way, it's somebody with experience. This is not a master's student, right? Or somebody looking for their first job. This is a real professional with good experience, actually. This CV, with a few improvements, could be a very outstanding CV, actually. So yeah, I've gone through the objective. I think it's good that you have an objective, and I've just gone through and I've made recommendations on how to improve the language, right? And again, if I was with the person, if the person was here, I would ask them a few questions to clarify a few things, right? In terms of language, there's a lot of extra words which I've crossed out. I've replaced a few words. The word company appears too many times. Some of the sentences are a little bit too long. And the language there can be improved. But overall, with some revisions, I think the objective could be really good. Could be really good. Okay, for work experience, now I can see by looking at the work experience that whoever wrote this CV did not look at my video on the top errors of CV writing, because it has some of the top errors that are common to 90% of CVs. So for example, the months, if you look carefully, I've gone through and crossed out all the months. You don't need months. If you want a full explanation as to why you don't want months in your CV, go back and look at the video that I have on the top errors for CVs. So I'm looking at the work experience now. In Vietnam Trading Investment Company Limited. So I wouldn't, I mean, firstly, you want, I don't know what "an" is, if that's part of the name, but that could be an error. I would want to clarify, like, why do you have the word "an" Vietnam instead of "a Vietnam," for example, "a Vietnam Trading Investment Company Limited." And I'd also want to know, is that the name of the company? Because you always want to use the specific names of the companies you worked for. Yeah, so you want a specific name, and you'll see I've made this comment repeatedly in the CV. You want a specific mailing address, so you want the name of the company, the mailing address, plus the web page or the URL of the company. Basically all on one line. In this format, it's not going to fit all on one line. But you'd basically want that, you'd try to get that on one line. If it's on two lines, that's fine. Yeah, and I've made some comments about the formatting, like you want your job titles to be in boldface for each position. And you'll notice I've made that comment repeatedly. There are some comments that I've made for each position, right? They're just repeated over and over again. So removing all the months from the whole CV, adding the mailing addresses for each position, adding the URLs for each position, and making the job titles boldface for each position in the whole CV. So I won't like say it over and over again. I'll just say it once, but you'll see I've made those comments over and over again. Okay, looking at the first job description, I've made some comments like you have the location in the first sentence, but again, you would not have a location in the description anywhere because the address would already be next to the company name, right? I've gone through the responsibilities and I've made some suggestions on how they could be improved with respect to like the language and the ordering of the responsibilities. Like you want related responsibilities grouped together, right? You have this kind of stray responsibility, interviewing, recruiting new employees. That one's related to the first 2 or 3 responsibilities. So you want them kind of grouped together, the ones that are related to each other. This is a good job, by the way. Like if with some improvements, this could be a very good experience. Like this could be a really valuable experience from if it's communicated in a professional way. This could be a really good thing to have on your CV. Really good. And you'll notice I've split up 1, 2, 3, 4. The 4th responsibility I've split up into 2 responsibilities. I've crossed out some things like keeping track of employee hours. You can just remove that and put down organizing schedules instead. I've crossed out some other things that I think are unnecessary, some other words to make the language a little bit more professional, basically. Okay, so the next work experience, this Lazada logistics, again, you want the address, the mailing address in there, and the URL. You want your position to be in boldface. So one thing I noticed here is you want the justification, the text justification, to be very consistent throughout the CV. Right? This is a small detail, but if you want to impress the person you're trying to impress, you want the details to be correct or consistent, let's say. So if I look at the sentence, manage the daily operations, you're using left and right justification to align the text. And then if I look at the responsibilities, you're using left justification for the text. Basically, I would recommend removing all left and right justification from the text and using only left justification for the entire CV. And it's especially important to be consistent, right? It seems like a small detail, but it's important on a document like a CV. On the CV, you want it to look good. And if you're mixing the justifications, the alignments of the text, and they're inconsistent, then it's not going to look good. And people like me notice that. So make sure that choose left justification. Left justification looks the best. If you want to use full justification or left and right justification, you need to use a different piece of software that knows that is very good at that. Some pieces of software packages are very good at that, and some are not. Okay, so in the responsibilities, I've made some modifications to the language to improve the language. basically. There's another kind of common error in here, maintain control of the COD process. So I don't know what COD means, but this is one of the top errors on CVs, and I talk about it in the top errors video. Not to use acronyms without spelling them out first. You only use acronyms if that acronym appears multiple times anyways. That's why acronyms are used in the first place. So this one does not appear multiple times. So you always spell it out. You always, for the first time you use an acronym, you always spell it out. But if you're not using it repeatedly, there's no reason to have an acronym at all. So I know that's very detailed. Like that's a very detailed comment, but like it's these kinds of details that make your CV better. Like if you want to optimize it and make it look the best it can be, those are the kinds of details that you want to pay attention to. And then the reconciliation of cash. I don't know what that means. So I put a question mark there. That might be something like keeping track of the budget, like making sure that the budget is balanced. So you might want to put something like balancing the budget instead of reconciling the cash. But again, I would ask you what you meant by that, right? Okay, I'm moving on to flipping over to page 2. Now on page 2, the template doesn't work. You have all this blank space here. So I would actually not use the template like this for page 2. I think it's not good. It's just a waste of space and it doesn't look good. So I would actually remove this from page 2. Yeah. Oh, and like you have a kind of dangling thing here. You want, instead of saying English, you want to put down languages there, right? And then you can put, good English listening, speaking, reading, writing skills. You don't need to put down writing or reading. You just put down your level of English proficiency. Like, have you ever taken an English language proficiency test? If you did take a test, you would put down like what the test was that you wrote. Like, is it a TOEFL test? You put down the score. You would put down the date that you took the test. But in this case, if you didn't take a test, you would just put down like proficient in English, and that's it. The CV itself should demonstrate that you're good at English writing. So you don't need to write that down, right? And then the interview, you don't really need to write down listening and speaking in either, because the interview is going to test that. When you have an interview, they're going to test you to see like how good your listening and speaking are. Okay, I'm looking at the top of page 2, organized training activities. So I've just made some comments about the language, correcting language and improving language. And then now I'm looking at the Neo Unicap job description, right? Making the same comments as usual. Okay, and then I have this note there. You'll see it, left justify. I've made that note a few times. Left justify, left justify, left justify. Right, to make it consistent with all the text. All the text should be left justified. And the responsibilities here are in rough shape. I noticed like some of the job descriptions are better than others. And this job description is in rough shape, like it needs a lot of corrections, actually, a lot of language corrections. But in also, like, there are some errors here. So you really don't want to have errors in your CV. You really don't want to have them, because some people will use those errors to simply discard it, right? If you have a stack, if you're trying to hire somebody, and you have a stack of 50 to 100 applicants, and you need to narrow that stack down to 5 or 10 people, one really easy way to do it is just to look through the CVs and remove the ones with obvious errors, right? Some people will do that, and they'll immediately make their job easier by eliminating half of the CVs that have obvious errors. So like here you have a space error, like no space after foreign suppliers, full stop, space. Support suppliers from other countries, right? That's a small error, but some people are going to notice that. People that are good with CVs, people that are good at paying attention to detail, they're going to notice those kinds of errors. Again, you want to not use acronyms unless you spell them out, right? HCM. I even wonder if that's a mistake. Like, did you mean HCMC? To me, it actually looks like a mistake. And I don't know what HN is. I guess that's Hanoi, but I'm not sure. So spell those out. Common error. There are some language improvements to make. Yeah. And there's some punctuation. Be careful with your punctuation, right? The punctuation has to be consistent. So I noticed the periods are not always consistent, right? At the end of this line, customer conference product booth fairs, you're missing a period. It's a very small detail, but some people like myself are gonna might notice that. Like you want your CV, if you want like your CV to be the most competitive it can be, you want to have all the details correct, yeah, or consistent. Okay, I'm looking at the next job. I don't know how to pronounce that. Donja Communication, JSC. So again, you have that problem with the acronyms. You want to spell the acronyms out when you use an acronym. So the first time they appear, they're spelled out so everybody knows what they mean. And I would not assume that anybody knows your acronyms. There are going to be some people looking at this that don't know the acronyms. And I talk about this in detail in a previous video, the top errors on CVs. I go into detail about why acronyms need to be spelled out. Okay, I went through the responsibilities. Again, this one has a lot of kind of improvements that could be made. So I could see that, like, when you have some of the job descriptions are really well done, and then some of them are not as well done. There's an inconsistency in how much time and effort and accuracy was put into each job description. I can see that by looking at it. So just keep that in mind. There's a lot of improvement that could be made to this job description. So I've gone in there and made some recommendations about how to improve the language. And I have a lot of question marks there because a lot of the language isn't clear. Like, do payroll, what does that mean? I don't really know what do payroll means. Does that mean responsible for for, I don't know. I guess I don't know what that means. Do payroll? I'm just not sure what that means. Uh, Social insurance for PG. I don't know what PG means. And you have PG over and over here. And I don't know what that means. And I hope it's not an error, because I'm looking at it and wondering if it's an error because you used the acronym DG, Dongia, if that's how you pronounce it. And then I'm wondering, did she mean DG? Or is it supposed to be PG there? So you really want to spell out your acronyms. If you spelled out your acronyms, you wouldn't have this error, I think. Or I don't even know if it's an error. It looks like an error to me, though. I would be more specific. You mentioned clients. Well, which clients are you talking about? Like, be more specific. I don't know what this responsibility is. Check the daily report online of PG. I don't know what that's about. Like, I put a question mark there and a question like, why is this important? This looks like a responsibility that it needs clarification. Either it needs to be clarified why it's important, or just remove it. Check the working style. That's, again, a very mysterious responsibility. I don't know what you're talking about. That needs to be clarified, and why it's important needs to be clarified. Yeah. So looking at the next job description, Fandin, I can't even pronounce it, but anyways, I see it's a high school teacher, mathematics teacher. So again, you put the address and the URL. Now this one, I can see that the description is well written. So this is one with a well written description, and I wish that all of the job descriptions were written as well as this one is. Again, I have this comment, make sure you left justify your text, right? It's inconsistent here. So you've got your full justification and left justification mixed up. Yeah, and then the third page, I've just made some small suggestions, minor corrections. Take the role of MC, a guide for the students. That needs to be clarified. I don't really know what that means. So that would need to be clarified a little bit. And by the way, if you remove this column, then the CV would fit on 2 pages, and it would be better. It's not really nice to have like a little bit of text on a 3rd page. You either want like a fullish page or no page, if you know what I mean. You don't really want a page with just a little bit. By the way, I would also consider adding references here explicitly, like references and then the names and contact information of 2 references at the bottom. Yeah, and like you could, if you wanted to, add a hobbies part, like some people put hobbies at the bottom too. That could be a possibility. So overall, hopefully this video is shorter than the first one. The previous one I made, the previous Open CV review video, was very long. It was too long. Hopefully this one's like a reasonable length. But anyways, this is an interesting CV. I think it's in kind of rough shape right now. But I can imagine working on this CV. It's going to need more than one iteration. But I can imagine reviewing this CV and iterating with it maybe 2 or 3 times and getting it into a really, really nice CV. Like, the experience here is really good, and it could be a really outstanding CV with some more work and some more revision. So I hope that's helpful. If you think it's helpful, please leave a comment in the comments section. Also, if you disagree with anything I say, please leave a comment. And if you think I missed anything, like some things that I left out that could also be improved that I didn't mention, feel free to leave a comment. Thanks.